Hi, everyone. So welcome to our Health Network panel. I'm Livia. I'm a PhD candidate from Brazil. And since, as you are going all to hear, we are all born and raised in global South countries, even though some of us attended to global North schools. And we are to talk a little bit about our project. We are a network that was founded last year after the bargaining exchanges with the PhD students that were attending the course and even not PhD, but some brilliant people, as you are going to hear after I say. And first of all, and then after we got in touch and started talking about our research, we found some common grounds, but also each of one of us has its own interests, research interests. So we are trying to combine all of this. And we got some support from that I need to mention, LawTransform support, City and Live. Thank you so much for helping us with applying for funding as well. I also would like to thank Elena from GRIP that is also helping us with the English part that is very important for us. And Free Art, that is an organization that funded our traveling to be here this year again. So as I said previously to my friends, we are now 13 people from 9 countries between South America, Caribbean, India, Africa, and not all of us are here this year, but we are all together, working together, and we already received some information and contact with others that are here today interested in joining the network. So we are really happy. Where are we going to? And so keep in touch with us. I'm a little bit distracted these first days because I'm joining the swimming in the fjords tomorrow, so I need to pass this kind of a big fear, and then I'll be more focused, but that's okay. So what we organize as friends is I ask them to say a little bit about their research or their hypothesis or arguments. And the second point that is what they think is the advantage of being a Global South scholar. And the third point is what the main challenge they think we are facing right now as a Global South scholar. So I'm going to introduce them briefly. In my right side, sorry, it's the fjord thing, sorry. I'm really confused. I have Wesley Moraire, that is a PhD candidate from the University of Cape Town, South Africa, and also working at GRIP, that is one of our supporters. We also have Adrian Juko, that I don't think he needs introduction, but he's a 15-year human rights lawyer, a PhD, he's already a doctor from the University of Pretoria. And then we have Ana Braconier, who is a postdoc at CIESAS, Mexico, but also a PhD from the University of Texas. And then we have Larissa Margarido, who's also from Brazil and from my same university, Fundação Getúlio Vargas, PhD candidate as well. And then Thalia Viveiros Guerrara, if I said correctly, who is also a recent doctor. We congratulate her, got this year, from the University of Massachusetts. Oh, this is, yes, you got it, yeah. So without any longer, I will pass the word. We are following this order after I trick Wesley to sit next to me, and he's going to address the 3 points. So the floor is yours, Wesley.
Maybe I should follow the example of the more established academics, and when you're told 5 minutes, you just add a 0 at the end and you do 50. Okay, so I've been asked to talk about three things. A summary of the special issue paper that that we are submitting in 2 weeks. And so the central argument in that paper is that citizens don't have effective access to justice. And I use Zimbabwe as a microcosm of former colonies that have plural cultural and legal traditions. And the basis of this argument is that the formal justice system is marred with obstacles that either prevent people from entering or navigating the formal justice system. The important thing to think about, and that sort of anchors the argument there, is the formal justice system doesn't seem to produce outcomes that meet the normative conceptions of justice that citizens have. And these problems can be traced back to colonization, where the colonial master applied the repugnancy test, which effectively made indigenous rules, regulations, and laws to operate in the shadow of the law, in other words, informally. Now, there may be many justice system reforms that have been implemented since the colonies became independent. And these obstacles to access to justice are analyzed in isolation in the most part. They're never sort of approached as a systemic problem. This is what I call band-aid solutions. One example would be legal aid, for example, which for a lot of people is one way to overcome the cost barrier, but I see it as a band-aid solution because it ignores the sort of socioeconomic inequalities that exist and the historical sort of inequalities that exist. So my contention is that these barriers are inherent in the justice system itself. And then I use the futility framework to argue that the formal justice system is replete with unacceptable risks that render attempts to access justice pointless for most people, especially the poor and small businesses. And while I accept that every justice system has risks for the intended users, I use 4 examples from the demand side and from the supply side to demonstrate the inherent and unacceptable nature of the risks that are in these justice systems. The risk of unfairness is then assessed squarely with the potential consequences associated with such risks. I'll give you one example. I say and I argue that the system, using Zimbabwe again as a microcosm, the system is rigged from the outset because of the dominance of legal positivism. It lacks pluralistic equality and isn't reflective of the social reality. Now, it cannot be said to be justice if it doesn't stem from the social realities of the population it seeks to serve. A system that is designed to be contrary to a people's way of life is exclusionary and inherently unfair. And so I will move on to what Livia wants me to talk about, which is the advantage of being a Global South scholar, which is very difficult to, it's a seemingly easy question, but difficult to talk about what the advantages are. I suppose the advantage is that you're always an underdog. You're always an underdog, and you have an element of surprise. An element of surprise, which again can be a disadvantage, because I think last year I wanted to say well done to Sylvia Tamale after she had a keynote, and to say, oh, this was amazing. But then I realized that would also seem like, what did I expect from Sylvia Tamale? I should have expected just greatness. And so what starts off as an advantage of being an underdog and having the element of surprise turns into a disadvantage, because then people see you and they shouldn't be surprised that you are brilliant. They should just know that you could be just as brilliant as everybody else. So take that as you may. Advantage, disadvantage. And the last thing is on the main challenge that Global South scholars must face, right? Yeah. Yes. must face. Again, it's difficult to narrow it down to just one. I have many, but I think now I want to focus on a current problem I am facing, which is publication. I constantly have to justify why I am choosing Zimbabwe if I'm using a framework, or why I am choosing Uganda if I am choosing, if I want to publish. And then it's something that Divine said, well, not today, but in his previous sessions, where he said that, you know, the preference as well, even for me, is to publish outside of the continent. And that's a challenge that is within me. And the first journal that I look up is the Journal of African Law at Oxford. And I don't look at University of Pretoria or anywhere else. I first look outside. So that one is an internal challenge that, you know, I think we all must face, and something that I am currently battling with. Thank you.
Thank you, Wesley. And just to be just a brief comment, I forgot to thank Catarina that embraced our project to publish a special issue at the journal, Direito GV in Brazil. So it's also this kind of support that empower us to keep going and to keep the network forward. So Adrian, please, if you want to. Anna? Okay.
I will start because with Juko, we are the team who took the challenge of making together a paper on judicial backlash comparing Uganda and Guatemala, which is not a very easy task. But we took the challenge, we created it for ourselves, and we've been meeting and we've been talking more and more about our contexts and trying to make the dialogue, not a comparison because we're not that systematic yet, but a dialogue. And to answer to your first question, so this dialogue, which is a work in progress, basically revisits a little bit of the core literature on the judicial backlash theory that mostly was created in the US, and that what we want to do is to bring our perspectives about Guatemala and Uganda and try to discuss these theories that are very centered in this very democratic country, right? And in a nutshell, what we are trying to say is that when political and economic powers are very concentrated, a judicial backlash can be more than only contentious politics in a democracy. It can lead to the consolidation of autocratic and anti-rights politics. And our cases, we want to believe that can also enlighten other cases in the global north, which are meant not to be autocratic or alike. So we are trying to bring this debate from our countries to other countries, other settings that are studied traditionally as established democracies. And to stick with the 5 minutes that we were given, because we could talk later about the cases and all that, and also because we are looking forward to the presentation of Catalina Smulowicz's book on judicial backlash and lawfare, where Juko will comment. So it will bring us light to strengthen our paper. So the challenges and the opportunities of being a Global South scholar, many topics come to my mind, but I will stick in two main points. And I think it's this is the opportunity to to discuss what with all due respect, to discuss our professors' works and to bring another kind of insight of the legacy that you have and all the professors have yes, nos enseñaron, and it's a very good moment to bring collaboration between the professors and between our colleagues, the so-called emergent scholars. And but it's also an opportunity to talk about these topics, for instance, judicial backlash, when the fieldwork it's our home. And when the fieldwork is our home, we are embedded, our bodies are embedded, and our voices are embedded. And I think that instead of taking this as influencing or biasing our research process, it's the opportunity for us to take a critical reflection on how our positionality brings data to what we are studying. Our experiences are not only experiences. There are data about higher structures in which we are embedded and that we are trying to understand. And in that critical exercise of thinking positionality, I think we have also the challenge of voicing what at least in the topics that we are writing now, which is judicial politics, at least in Guatemala, judicial politics have been the judicial backlash, the current judicial backlash has been understood as the counter reaction of the anti-corruption efforts. That's how it has been told. But when we go a little bit further, actually the judicial backlash that is happening is also happening because the court has advanced some indigenous people's rights, very little, but has challenged at least the entrenched interests of big corporations of extraction, and also the judicial decisions have challenged the military that have been in place and in power through their decisions about transitional justice and making justice in a genocidal country. So I think a position scholar in Guatemala, it's the challenge of saying, okay, yes, it is a judicial backlash against anti-corruption, but it also, and I think more importantly, a colonial backlash because it's revealing all the structures of extraction of the land, of administration, and of the bodies of the people. So I think that those are like the advantages and the challenges of voicing correctly what is happening, taking into account all the positionalities as a person from the global south. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Anna. Adrian, please.
Thank you so much. Like Anna said, we are writing on the same topics and comparing our countries, Guatemala and Uganda, and finding out, even just discovering our countries. That's also interesting that I practically knew nothing about Guatemala before this project. I know quite something now, and Anna, I think, also knows a little bit about Uganda, some little more. And that also speaks to how we communicate as the South to South. Do we really engage with each other? I always told people I know a lot more about the US, about Canada, about Germany, than I know about Africa, and certainly than I know about Latin America, for sure. And why that is so is also the way that knowledge is also portrayed and also built up. So I'm going to make 2 or 3 observations from the study that we're doing. One is that although our countries may be so far apart, Africa and Latin America, there are so many things that are close that we ought to look at. There are things we ought to consider that are really very close, including political systems that both countries do have. That's something we're studying, how each political system in the different countries actually leads to judicial backlash in some ways. For example, we found out actually just this morning that judicial backlash in Uganda, for example, is being used by the president to play off the legislature on the issues of LGBT issues. Like the judiciary, the legislature and the judiciary get at war over LGBT for the benefit of the president for some reasons, because of the autocracy that's happening. Number two is that if you look at the issues, they're a little bit different, but also in a way similar. Ours is mainly LGBT issues. There is a judicial backlash on that. The reason why there's no judicial backlash on other issues is because, generally speaking, the government, the judiciary, is fully in control of the president. They basically do what the president wants, except on a few issues, which may be even on the issue of LGBT rights. And for them, it's mostly about corruption, extractive industries, and indigenous people's rights. And also, what is clear is that the issues we are fighting are the same issues, the same forces that we are working on, that are opposing us, and the same countries, in the different countries are actually the same forces that we have to work against. And these are the same forces also that are happening in Texas, happening in the US, in Florida. You know, the same sort of forces that we are fighting. People who are privileged, who are seeing that they are losing privilege if they give some way to other people. So the issue may be LGBT, the issue may be extractives and corruption, but it's about entrenched forces who feel that this is our right, and we are actually interfering and taking away their rights and powers. Just to the second leg of the question around the benefits of being a Global South scholar. Benefits, maybe one benefit I would look at is that you always have a lot to write about. Like, there are so many issues that people have not written about. All I need to do is get series paper and remove Norway or remove USA and put Uganda, and I have completely different contexts to write about. So for me, I always see that as an advantage. I never run out of things to write just about my country. And if you tell me to write about Kenya and South Africa and Zimbabwe, I'll get completely new papers, even from my same paper. So for me, that's an advantage that I see in that. Number two is that the studies that we do are actually relevant to the struggles of our people. Like you write, for example, when I write about LGBT rights, I feel like I'm making a contribution directly to the people that I work for in Uganda. I write about my work, about legal aid, about LGBT suffering, and this is something that it's not just theoretical, something that makes a practical change in the lives of the people that I work for. That I see as an advantage because we can still do that. And then some of the challenges that we have to work with, one of them I think is what you call the underdog, you know, undervaluing our work all the time. Sometimes I look at my citations and I'm like, hey, what happened? No one really cites this, why not? So that's something that we have to do with as scholars from the Global South, that you have less citations than a paper from the North. I always get surprised, Siri, when I see my profile. Always the first profile that appears on Google is the one from here. I'm like, but I do more with Hiraf than I do with the state. Why is it the first that appears when you Google my name? But well, it does. And that's how the global politics works. And finally, on that same point, I would also say that we are tagged into the system of Western thinking, Western academia. We write in English, publish in English, even if this is not our language. Funding models are in English. The scholarship I would have wanted as an African is not this. This is not how we do things in Africa. We sit around fireplaces and tell stories. We don't publish papers. Well, you have published papers if you want to be a Global South scholar. So a Global South scholar that has a Western kind of thinking. So we are not exactly Global South scholars. We are Global North scholars writing from the South. The universities we go to, the things we do, the studies we do are basically Global North things, not Global South things. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Larissa, please.
Hello. So first of all, I would actually like to thank Livia for creating this network. It was her initiative after last year's Bergen Exchanges. She did an amazing job in just 3 months of building this network and getting us in contact with many people that now support us and fund us. So that was really brilliant. Without you, we wouldn't be here having this conversation. So thank you. Honestly, 5 minutes is so hard. I research in my PhD and I'm writing about child marriage in Brazil. So child marriage is a problem worldwide, and until pretty much last year, it was not a public talk in Brazil. So last year we had the first public hearing about it by the Chamber of Deputies. But before that, it was as if the problem did not exist, even though we do have official data on it from a very, very long time. So as soon as our census, our demographic census started being held, we already had data on child marriage because the info they get is from girls and boys from 10 years on. So we do have knowledge on both legal and informal marriages from people from 10 years on. So we do have data. The state has data, the municipalities have data, and nothing is ever done, nothing is ever talked about. And in a way, talking a little bit about the disadvantage, and I connected so much to one of the comments to the previous panels. It's like every time there are papers written about child marriage that mention Latin America and mention Brazil, they're written by international institutions that I don't need to say the name, but you guys probably know, that talk about Latin America and talk about Africa and talk about Asia as one unified thing. And they have no real idea of what happens in which one of those countries. And they completely disregard, in the case of Brazil, for example, that it is one of the biggest countries in the world. We have so many different realities inside of it. So there are no easy solutions. There are no easy answers. And the fact that all of the problems we are talking about in our research haven't been solved in our countries and in general in the global south, is because the solutions that people from the global north are suggesting do not work for us. So I do think it is our duty, as very privileged people, I think I can say that people here, they are talking about the global south. We are pretty much very privileged people that come, and I can speak on my own behalf. I'm a very privileged person because most girls that live this would never have the opportunity of being here talking about their lives. And also I do think, and that's what I try to do in my work, even though the ethics committee of my institution and of many others and the public institutions of Brazil, they try to stop us of giving people voice. What I'm trying to do in my work is understanding what these girls go through. Because also, every time I talk about child marriage with people, it's either, oh, those girls are victims, they have no idea what's going on, poor them, we need to hold their hands and show them the light. And on the other aspect is, and that is what we have on judicial decisions in Brazil. They chose that, so they have to bear the consequences of it. And the reality is much more complex than this. And what I'm trying to do, and I do think that Global South students can do, regardless of what they study, is really listen to people and give voice to people and try to make academic knowledge out of real life and not the other way around, because those categories that we learn in graduate school and even in postgrad do not work for us. So pretty much that's what I'm trying to do. And regarding advantages, I think we have, and I've talked a lot about this since last year when I was a guest researcher here. Every time I meet foreigners, they're talking about their country outside of their home. We are so passionate because we see people just talking about bad things. Brazil lacks so much, and that's true. I'm not saying it's not, but Brazil is also so good in so many things. We are doing a lot of good things. We're doing a lot of things right, and I do think we have this possibility of showing also to the global north that sometimes we do things in our own way that work better for us, and sometimes people in the global north could learn a lot from us as well. So I think we have this possibility of, in a way, shocking them and at the same time presenting new ways of thinking things. I do think that innovation in academy comes a lot from us. In a way, we are really the ones trying to push things to be different. And so thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Larissa. Please, Talia. Well, I've pretty much considered myself an uncovered disruptor. But now that I've earned my PhD, I am already a professional disruptor. So please, Livia, I beg your indulgence, and I will begin the way around. I'll start off by mentioning the challenges, the opportunities, and then I'll wrap up my, my conversation with the topic in a nutshell. So I'd like to start off by saying that as South-South scholars, we are all custodians of one shared history and shared positionalities as well in the world. And a huge responsibility has been passed on for us all. So, and this huge moral responsibility is precisely what Anna touched on, like understanding the spirit of our times, the work, the legacies that our professors have so intensely worked on. But also at the same time, we have the challenge of anticipating the future. We are confronted with the escalating climate crisis, one of the worst human challenges in history. So we often grapple with the aspirations and limitations of legal frameworks that have been commonly transformative in our jurisdictions specifically. And there's much work about the so-called transformative constitutionalism paradigm that has been reflected on throughout Bergen exchanges. These wave of reforms wash out across Latin America during the 80s and 90s, but also in Africa, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Kenya most recently. So born into this area of very important constitutional frameworks, transformative constitutional frameworks, I believe that we cannot escape that reality. We cannot escape engaging critically, but also very, very compassionately with those frameworks as well. And we lay at the intersection between the past and the future, as mentioned earlier. So, but at the same time, I believe our challenges do not only encompass this temporal scale, the past and the future, but also lead us to negotiate our own identities in different spaces. So born and raised in the global South, having my heart, my life experience, my thought trajectory evolved there, imbues me, of course, with a unique positionality in global North spaces, where I happen to be trained sometime and work as well. So as Larissa mentioned already, in these global North spaces, we are oftentimes seen as a monolith, which I believe restrain us from exchanging and harnessing a very useful knowledge trajectory you all have contributed to. So to put it more specific to our field of study, which is legal change and inequality, that's our whole panel, what our whole panel is about. These temporal and spatial dimensions that challenge us implies scrutinizing transformative constitutionalism's evolving trajectory and questioning its relevance, critically questioning its relevance in addressing today's challenges from very different angles, very nuanced angles and exchanges between South-South geographies, which oftentimes, of course, we cannot avoid. These worldviews even stand in tension with each other. We need to ignite these uncomfortable conversations. We cannot escape from those. So one of our main strengths arises as well from our shared commitment to understanding our history, but also shaping our destiny. And please, I believe that our power, and let me emphasize this, lies in the diversity that has tied us together with Livia's work and impulse in a common framework. So through solidarity, we aim to gain consciousness of the deeply, deeply ingrained power asymmetries in knowledge creation and dissemination. In a nutshell, unity within diversity helps us to connect our storied pasts to the multifaceted global challenges of today, to learn horizontally, exchange horizontally, and to re-signify our contributions into highly contested spaces
where the nuanced richness of the global south is often sidelined, is often seen as a monolith. I believe that we believe, and please let me speak as we have already had this conversation, there's so much knowledge to harness from this solidarity / diversity that directly speak to today's most pressing challenge, and that is climate change, I believe. So going to my topic, just after recounting this set of challenges and advantages, I believe the escalating crisis, climate crisis, has captured my concern and interest, as well of some of my colleagues here. And the overarching I developed, oh, thank you, I'm just being called up to stop, but I believe it was like 1 hour, I'm 1 hour left. So my main argument is that I looked into the constitutional protection mechanisms that most Latin American countries enact during the 80s and 90s. And I scrutinize whether their remedial possibilities can actually confront challenges that are not only collective, but also what I argue are multidimensional. They encompass an ecological and a social dimension as well, because they are so deeply intertwined with specifically with lack of access to resilient, available and quality healthcare systems. So this South-to-South framework, me personally in my work, helps me shine a light between the practices, the legal traditions, specifically in Ecuador, and how they compare to Mexico's amparo, for example. The opportunities these both countries have in igniting transformation, and if these opportunities are not on the ground, why is so? So overall, I scrutinize the 77 cases that have been brought to date in Latin American courts, in domestic courts. These are climate litigation cases, which have spiked since the adoption of the Paris Agreement in 2015, but I focus specifically in Mexico and Ecuador to harness the learning curve both countries have undergone since the 80s, and Ecuador more lately since the 2003. So pretty much that's in a nutshell. Stay tuned for our next publication, for our next special journal, and also my heartfelt thanks to LawTransforms and to all you that make this possible.
Thank you all for giving just a little taste for people to know some of the things we are working with. If you want to make questions, you can just go to the mic, please. And since I already, there's a running. As in the previous ones, just please say your name and ask your question.
Okay, so that was me being smart, huh? So Lisa Wagner from the Department of Government and also from LawTransform. And I mean, I'm old enough, so you will forgive me for saying this. Wow, I'm so proud of you. This is so amazing, and it's super inspiring. I'm going to ask maybe a slightly provocative question, and I think maybe it could be helpful for when you write the introduction to the special issue. Why exactly is the concept global south versus a global north useful for you? What are the challenges with it? Because we talk about inequalities, we talk about having privileged within, we talk about I think it was Wesley using the term, or with Adrian maybe, using the term being a global scholar, in working on the global south. So these are kind of complexities, but are this term global south vis-a-vis global north, is it useful, and why? And what are the challenges? I think this could be a really nice part of the introduction.
Thank you. This has been such a fantastic panel. I'm not old enough, but I'm still very proud of you. I think that, I just want to congratulate Siri and LawTransform actually, because I think it is the platform that has created this possibility, and of course, Livia for bringing all of this together. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things to push you further in your sort of decolonizing of knowledge. The first thing is that of course, as a broad category, this, the global south versus the global north has relevance, has resonance. And I completely agree with what Anna and Adrian said, that we know so little about each other as opposed to the US and Europe and so on. But of course, for me, someone who's been to most of the Bergen exchanges, this one has been very special because I feel like over the years, we are seeing the fault lines and the contradictions emerging within the global north in much greater detail. So for example, the sessions we had on Monday on Norway and the Sami people and, all the other things. So is it helpful to have this category of global, as Lisa also said, between the global north and the global south, or really the issues about power and, the hierarchies of colonialism, capitalism, and patriarchy, which are existing across these jurisdictions? So that is one thing. The second thing I want to push, and that it's sort of like a provocation from the previous panel about decolonization of knowledge and so on, is that on the one hand, we need to do all of that. But on the other hand, in terms of strategies of resistance, there are two things which, my own work in both academia and policy and in the activist space. One is that to fight the current battles, like even as you push for the changes in the law and the practice, you still, in the current mode, and especially in the activist space, the battles are like, as Adrian said, we can write as many papers because there's just so many issues, right? And so in the current mode of struggle, you still have to engage with the current norms. And so how much of the struggle should be focusing on also on, pushing back within the existing frames the struggles of the people that we want to represent? And the second thing is decolonizing academic language. And by that, I mean not just not at the level at which we had the discussion in the previous panel and this panel, but really we are so abstract. One of the things that I learned as I was writing op-eds in newspapers and things like that is that how abstract and ununderstandable we are to the rest of the world. And as the class of academia becomes subject to attack from others, academic freedom is under threat, do we need to come down from the ivory tower? And I don't mean that as a powerful thing, I just mean it as a distance thing as well, to reach out in language that makes sense. And we talked, yesterday we heard about the importance of language, the importance of culture. Are there ways in which we can imagine, and that doesn't have to be a North versus South thing, but just as the future generation of scholars thing, is that something that you can reflect upon? Thank you.
Hi, Carmelisa. I'm with CMI, and LawTransform somehow. Yeah, I'm also in awe with your project and the possibilities, and I'm reminded of what Divine says, that he says it about Africa, but I guess these spaces, as Adrian said, are laboratories of possibilities and things that can be done. And there is an expression that it makes sense in Portuguese. I'm not sure if it translates well in English, which is, I've been surpassed by those who preceded me, which is, I'm kind of going to, in the sense that I'm going to repeat a little bit on this discussion on global South versus global North. It's kind of an opposition, and if we want to link up with this humanity, this global humanity, and giving to the hegemony, so giving from the margins to the hegemony, showing the hegemony other forms and other ways of being, of inhabiting, of thinking. Perhaps instead of creating this opposition, we could think of other ways, not just in the name, because there are things in the name, right? So when we're talking about global South or global North, what we are exactly saying is, well, Divine said global Europe, but it's global whiteness, so in opposition to something. And even the people who inhabit white bodies and are privileged in the non-hegemonic countries like Brazil or Latin America, when moving outside, they become less white, so they disinhabit their whiteness. And there are discussions within it, and it's important to be critical of these names and how these names came to be. Why is it that we accept global South? Because what is in the global North? There are bodies in the so-called global North that are inhabiting the same realities and excisions and erasures and dehumanization as we do in these spaces. And there are other privileged in our spaces that are inhabiting realities of the so-called global north. And I think that you as scholars, as critical scholars, and with this amazing project that you're starting, you are extremely well positioned. This is your advantage to really create this critical thinking and just dismantle, you're a disruptor, just dismantle these names that are imposed on us, because these are names imposed on us. Why do we accept that we are the global south? We are humans, we are part of Earth, right? And we need to impose our rules. So this is my request of you.
I'm Sophia, I'm from FGV in São Paulo. I just really wanted to thank all of you for this amazing panel. It was a joy to listen to you as a junior scholar from the Global South. I felt very seen and identified. I wanted to make two comments. One is that I feel really struck by this, that if you are a scholar from the Global South, it is immediately assumed that you research your own country. Whereas if you're a scholar from the Global North, it's like you can take your pick and research whatever area of the world you think is most interesting, right? Yeah, sometimes, yeah, possibly. And I think that, well, as scholars from the Global South, we should also get to choose if maybe we want to do research on another area, and sometimes being from the Global South will put us in a better equipped position to understand the context of a different Global South country in some senses. And I think that what you are creating, this dialogue between Guatemala and Uganda and all the other countries, it's something that really advances knowledge from these other countries and that can help towards that issue as well. And there's a question that I wanted to pose to you about something that Anna mentioned about doing field work in your own country, because as we know, a lot of the issues on methodology and ethics and whatnot, they assume that you live in one place and you do field work in another, and Anna touched upon that. So I just wanted to hear more about perhaps the challenges and the implications of doing work in a place where you are embedded and you might be a part of the community that you are researching or not. Whereas if you come from a different country, you are put sometimes in a position of neutrality that can be good and that can be useful for research in a way. And when you're from that country, you have to navigate these internal inequalities within your own country and within different communities. I think that that's something that Larry reflects a lot about, I know, so I just wanted to hear about that from all of you, and thank you so much again.
Mi pregunta es si han podido construir una horizontalidad y reciprocidad con los movimientos sociales con los cuales trabajan, y si han logrado que su herramienta técnica académica sirva para casos de peritaje o para el acompañamiento técnico de las necesidades que tengan a los movimientos en lucha.
My question is whether you have managed to construct from a position of horizontality and reciprocity relations with movements of struggle in your countries, and particularly whether your academic knowledge has contributed to applied knowledge like special anthropological or special expert witness reports or technical assistance to those movements in struggle.
Thank you all for your excellent reflections. In the spirit of muddying the water a bit further, and maybe also offering a way out of these dichotomies of global south, global north, maybe we can think of how it exists, a lot of global south in plural in the global north, and a lot of global north in plural in the global south. And I mean this not just in the physical sense. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Bianca. I was thinking about the reflection Sophia made about you being from a foreign place, and if you are from global north, you are allowed to say and research whatever, and this does not apply necessarily to people coming from global south. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, because sometimes I feel like our self-esteem, like it was mentioned, and the expectations that we have upon ourselves from global south stimulate the practice that has been imposed on us, like that has been said. For example, it's very common that if you are reading a paper, a law paper from a researcher from global south, the title of the paper can be like on proportionality, for example. We as scholars from global south would never publish a paper sobre a proporcionalidade, because it would be too generic. We wouldn't be too very criterial about what we were saying. And we impose those rules that it's like if you're reading something from the foreign countries, this is okay. But sometimes the practices that we adopt as researchers within our own countries, they stimulate this kind of, I don't know, it's not a disparity between who we are learning from and who we think we should be. So yes, I wanted to have a take on that, because you know, you guys are publishing on a special issue, and maybe this is also a topic of reflection. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Oh, I'm kind of short down. I didn't know that. I think for me, my personal sort of reflection and to comment, I want to applaud you guys for this network. I think it's quite beautiful for like just to have scholars from the global south, but like also very marginalized and very sort of like peripheralized engagements actually being recentered. Because I think for me, in terms of the thinking, or at least this idea of this like dichotomy between the global south and the global north, I don't think that should be the center of the conversation, right? I think the network that you guys are actually establishing is trying to actually recenter, right, the narratives that are coming from the global south. I know that personally for myself, I'm from South Africa, and I feel compelled, it's a big social responsibility for me to actually write about, first of all, Black women, but like also Black women in South Africa, right? Because we then once upon a time existed in this idea or space of non-being, right? And I think, who's this scholar, but they write about this abyssal line, right? Where the global north is the space of being, but like the global south is then erased and eliminated, right? So I think for me, in terms of us actually doing the work in the global south, is very imperative, because then when we actually put ourselves on print and our narratives on print, we actually become beings, we become alive, right, within the text that have not existed for a very long time. So I think you guys are doing phenomenal work, and it shouldn't be about, the center should not be about us engaging in this dichotomy, but it is just us bringing life to our stories and our existence. Thank you. I'm so nervous, God.
So thank you everybody for the amazing comments and suggestions. We have 6 minutes, so I will give 1 minute each. And about the thoughts for the introduction, which should be my job, but also a collective job, we can discuss later. So I will step aside. So.
Okay, so I think public science is important, and I'm an advocate for it. It's gotten me into trouble with my seniors, because then you've dumbed it down too much. But there's a balance to be struck, and I think we should strive for that. And in terms of being critical of names, I mean, I'm not a fan of Global South, and where I can exclude it in when I write, I definitely do. But you know, one of the people who are old enough, I don't know if she remembers telling me this, but I had written a paper that was borderline activist and on decolonizing African law, and it was hard hitting, so to speak. And it was, well, maybe take out some of these phrases and words and arguments until you make a name and people can actually listen to you. And I thought it was insightful in as much as it is one of those things where you don't want to listen to it. But when I did take it out, you know, it was accepted into the journal, and it tells you all you need to know about that sort of process. So I think we should strike the balance. And I think we're quoting Divine a lot, and it's not because you're here, but I think it's because everything is just so aligned. And I think I will call this disobedient scholarship, I think, is what we should strive to do. And if you look up Divine and disobedience, you'll find more about that. And I think that's sort of what we are also trying to do, or what we are doing with this South-South network. It's to speak about these topics and saying, hey, you have a lot to learn from us. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think I've learned more from the comments than anything else, and lots of things to reflect about, like you said, for the introduction and all that. Just a little anecdote, whenever I come into Norway, usually I go through Amsterdam, and they usually ask me at the airport, what have you come to do? And I always tell them research. These guys always make me to produce my papers to prove that I've come to research. Of course, they get comfortable because they don't find that I've come to do research. But that question that you asked, that why should we not be researching about other countries? Because it looks strange if we are researching about Norway, about Germany, about the US. Why can't we do that? And we are going to do it, by the way, soon.
So the invitation of rethinking the South-South network title is it's important. We need to tackle that. But it's always also very important to remember that academia is geopolitics, and it has always been geopolitics, and that at least in Central America and Guatemala in particular, academic research has been implemented to justify and better planify extraction of resources or planifying governmental actions, because we are a fragile democracy. So those things I think that we need to make them explicit. And I think also about Sophia's and Moira's question. The reason I came to study what I studied for the PhD is because I had a long time experience of alliance with indigenous organizations, and these people with who I used to work, well, I still work, asked me to uncover what the Constitutional Court, how it works, because it's an institution unreachable for these colleagues. And I guess that the reciprocity or the retribution of the work is because they pushed me to think about my positionality as the person who I am in relation to Guatemalan society, and then tell them how does that black box for them, not for everybody. There's people that really know how the constitutional the Constitutional Court works, but for the big majority, it's a big black box. And my role was to take advantage of my positionality, understand how it works, the informal links, the influences, all these kind of things, and inform to them in a different work that is not a scholarship work, but more in the conversation on how to build better litigation strategies. Thank you.
So since we have very little time, I'm going to focus just on kind of one question, two questions that can be combined, which is Moira's comment on how to return the research, how to bring it back to people, and at the same time, Namita's saying on decolonizing academic language. And personally, for me, that has been something very important, especially language. I worked with speech analysis during my master, and this is something I've been working with for a while, and it's extremely complicated, especially in Brazil, because language is used institutionally as a means to make sure that knowledge does not reach certain people. And even though there are genuine initiatives, and I think yesterday Aling showed us that 2.2 kilo document in which the idea was beautiful, but how it was written, I do think there's a lot of production, academic production, and even policy production that is done in a way that is extremely inaccessible to people, and this is not accidental. So in Brazil, there is this clear, complicated system, and I think worldwide, honestly, in which for you to be considered a true academic, you have to communicate and to write in a certain way that will guarantee that people don't know what you're really talking about. And when you simplify the knowledge to people, then you're not really an academic, are you? So I do think this is really a challenge that we have, not just the Global South, but everybody, that we really have to understand, why are we doing what we are doing? And why are we establishing academic language as something so inaccessible as so many other things that we are criticizing? So that's it.
Thank you all. As I'm literally in minus 10 seconds, I would just thank you all. This is precisely what the network is all about. You all, your reflections were such a boost of encouragement. That is something like we really owe you. So thank you, and keep on enjoying the Bergen exchanges. More is on the horizon.